Tonight, we venture into the unknown with two chilling tales that will leave you questioning what truly lurks in the shadows. A long-haul trucker encounters something unexplainable on a desolate Wyoming highway, while a mysterious midnight drive to Ash Hollow reveals horrors best left undiscovered. These are not just stories, they are warnings, whispers of the eerie world just beyond our understanding. Dare to listen and prepare to be haunted. Before we dive in, make sure to like, subscribe, and join our creepy community to help the channel grow. Your support fuels our exploration of the strange and the terrifying.
The endless highway stretched before me like a pale, lifeless serpent, winding through the desolate landscape of eastern Wyoming. My name is Marcus Holloway, and I've been driving long-haul routes for 17 years. But something about this particular winter night felt different, oppressively different. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read 12 degrees Fahrenheit. No snow, just a bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep through the thick walls of my Peterbilt truck, creating an unsettling stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I'd been driving since dawn, hauling a load of industrial machinery from Salt Lake City to Cheyenne, and fatigue was beginning to consume me. Rawlins was the next town, barely a blip on the map, but I knew there was a small roadside diner called Crossroads Rest, where I could grab some coffee and maybe a quick bite. My eyes were growing heavy, and the monotonous white lines of the interstate were starting to blur. The diner emerged like a beacon in the darkness, its flickering neon sign casting a sickly yellow glow against the pitch-black landscape. I pulled my rig into the nearly empty parking lot, the diesel engine's rumble breaking the eerie silence. A few truckers' vehicles were scattered around, but no one seemed to be moving. Inside, the diner was warm but eerily quiet. An older waitress with steel-gray hair and tired eyes nodded at me. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice raspy and devoid of emotion. I nodded, sliding into a worn vinyl booth. The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly what I needed to push through the remaining miles. I ate a quick ham sandwich, barely tasting it, my mind already drifting back to the long, lonely road ahead. After about 30 minutes, I paid my bill and walked back to the truck, the cold air hitting me like a sharp blade. That's when I noticed something peculiar: small handprints on the passenger side window. At first, I assumed they were on the outside, typical marks left by curious children or road-weary travelers. But as I leaned closer, something felt off. The prints seemed crisp, almost pristine, untouched by the frost that had been collecting on the truck's exterior. I ran my gloved hand across the window, expecting the condensation to smear. But the prints remained perfectly intact, their delicate lines undisturbed. Just small, distinct handprints pressed against the glass from the inside of the window. From the inside. A fleeting thought crossed my mind. Had someone been in my truck while I was in the diner? Impossible. I always locked the doors. Always. The electronic lock chirped faithfully every time I walked away, a sound I'd heard thousands of times over my years on the road. Yet those handprints lingered, a silent contradiction to everything I knew. I shook my head, dismissing the growing unease. Fatigue plays tricks on the mind, especially on these long, isolated stretches of highway. I climbed into the driver's seat, the warm air of the truck's cabin a stark contrast to the freezing Wyoming night. But as I adjusted my mirrors, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Something was wrong. The handprints haunted me, those delicate, perfectly formed impressions that defied rational explanation. My mind raced with increasingly bizarre scenarios, each more improbable than the last. How could something have been inside my truck without leaving any trace? I began my methodical examination of the cab, moving with the deliberate carefulness of a man desperate to disprove his own growing terror. Every compartment, every crevice received my scrutiny. The sleeper berth, immaculate. The storage compartments, undisturbed. The floor mats, nothing. Not a misplaced item, not a single strand of unknown fabric, not the slightest evidence of an intruder. Yet the handprints remained, mocking my investigation. My breathing grew shallow, each inhalation feeling heavier than the last. The truck's interior, usually a sanctuary of familiarity after years of long-haul driving, now felt alien. A space transformed into something unrecognizable, charged with an inexplicable menace. That's when I heard it. A sound so soft initially that it might have been dismissed as merely the settling of metal or the wind's caress against the truck's exterior, but it was neither. Scratch. A deliberate, measured scraping against the exterior of the truck's rear panel. Not random, not accidental, something methodical, something intentional. Scratching again. The sound grew slightly more insistent, like fingernails, or something resembling fingernails, tracing a slow, calculated path along the metal surface. Not frantic, not desperate, but precise. Calculating. I froze. The Wyoming night pressed against the windows, a wall of impenetrable darkness. No streetlights penetrated this remote parking area. No other vehicles stirred. The diner's distant neon sign flickered weakly, a dying ember in the vast blackness. The rhythm was hypnotic, almost musical, if music could be stripped of all warmth, all humanity, reduced to a pure, primal communication of what? Intent? Hunger? Something beyond comprehension. My hand, trembling slightly, reached for the door lock. A reflexive movement. Protection against what, I could not say. The scratching continued, steady, patient, waiting. The silence became unbearable. Those handprints, those impossible, inexplicable marks, continued to burn in my mind. I had searched every inch of the truck's interior, found nothing, yet the mystery gnawed at me like a persistent wound. Rational thought battled with an almost primordial sense of unease. I needed to know. The decision to exit the truck wasn't sudden, but a gradual submission to an internal pressure that had been building since I first noticed those tiny handprints. Uncertainty is a torment far more devastating than any concrete threat. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the door handle. The metal lug wrench felt cold and reassuring in my hand, a makeshift weapon against the unknown. My phone's flashlight cut a narrow path through the absolute darkness of the Rollins parking lot. The beam trembled slightly. Whether from the cold or my own unsteady grip, I couldn't tell. I circled the truck methodically, every sense heightened. The massive Peterbilt seemed to dwarf me, its silver-gray body reflecting what little ambient light existed. Each sweep of my light revealed nothing. No footprints, no disturbed gravel, no signs of any intrusion. The handprints haunted me, but now seemed almost imagined. I checked my watch and felt a jolt of disbelief. 90 minutes. Nearly an hour and a half had passed since I first noticed those impossible prints. Time had slipped away, consumed by my methodical search and growing paranoia. Exhaustion swept over me. The night's tension, the endless highway, the psychological strain, it all converged into an overwhelming wave of fatigue. The parking lot was deserted. The diner's neon sign had long since gone dark. Logic whispered that I was safe. I decided to rest, just a few hours before continuing my journey to Cheyenne. The cab's sleeper berth enveloped me in familiar comfort. My work jacket became a makeshift blanket. Despite the lingering unease, sleep claimed me quickly. Midnight came with a sound. Not a scratch this time, something more deliberate, a methodical separation. Metal against metal. A grinding connection being slowly, carefully undone. The sound of something trying to disconnect my truck's cab from its trailer. Rational thought battled with primal fear. Every instinct screamed to investigate, to look outside, to confirm the source of the sound. But something deeper, something more primitive, held me frozen. The connections between truck and trailer were being methodically worked, each sound precise, calculated, as if whatever was outside possessed an intimate understanding of the truck's mechanical structure. I did not move, could not move. The sounds continued, persistent, patient, methodical. Then silence. Overwhelming, oppressive silence. Exhaustion overcame me once more, pulling me back into unconsciousness. Dawn broke cold and clear. I awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented. Sunlight streamed through the frost-etched windows. I stepped outside, half expecting chaos, half expecting destruction. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The trailer's connections remained secure, no signs of disturbance, no evidence of the night's mysterious sounds. Only the memory remained, and the lingering question. What had been out there in the darkness? What had watched? What had waited?
It was nearing midnight when I found myself on Route 36, a desolate stretch of highway cutting through the Nebraska plains. The cab of my truck, a battered old Freightliner, thrummed with the steady vibration of the engine. Outside, the world was ink black, broken only by the twin beams of my headlights carving tunnels through the void. The radio crackled with static, occasionally spitting out a half-tune before dissolving into white noise. I'd turned it off an hour ago, leaving only the hum of the tires on asphalt and the occasional creak of the truck's frame to keep me company. I wasn't far from my destination, Ash Hollow, a small town most maps forgot to mark. The delivery was nothing special, just another load of supplies for a convenience store on the outskirts. But something about this night felt off. Maybe it was the fatigue settling in, the weight of countless hours behind the wheel. My eyelids were heavy, and I had to blink hard to keep them open. Just another 30 miles, I muttered to myself, gripping the wheel tighter. You've done worse. The night seemed unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that prickles the back of your neck. No other cars, no distant glow of farmhouses, just the empty road and an endless sea of darkness. The occasional gust of wind rattled the cab, and I caught myself glancing at the rearview mirrors more often than necessary. It was silly, of course, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out here. And then I saw it. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, faint at first, but growing brighter as they approached. A sense of relief washed over me. Another traveler. It was strange how comforting the sight of another vehicle could be, even when you knew nothing about the person behind the wheel. I adjusted my grip and watched as the car drew closer, its lights illuminating the road ahead. It was an old sedan, the kind you'd expect to see abandoned in a junkyard. The paint was peeling, and one of the headlights flickered erratically. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver, a gaunt man with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes, staring straight ahead. But it wasn't the driver that caught my attention. It was the child in the back seat. At first glance, it seemed like a normal kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old. But as the car passed, I noticed the hair. Long, impossibly long, cascading in golden waves down to the seat. It was the kind of hair you'd expect on a woman who'd spent a decade growing it, not on a toddler. The strands caught the light of my headlights for a brief moment, shimmering unnaturally, almost like they were glowing. The child's face was pale, almost waxen, with wide, unblinking eyes that seemed to stare right at me as the car sped by. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the car's taillights receding into the distance. But the road behind me was empty. The car was gone. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease clawing at my chest. It was late, and I was tired. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. I'd heard of truckers seeing strange things on the road, hallucinations brought on by exhaustion. This had to be one of those times. "Get a grip, Nate," I said aloud, the sound of my voice a feeble attempt to ground myself. "Just keep your eyes on the road." But as I drove on, the image of that child lingered in my mind. The hair, the eyes, the way it had looked at me. It didn't feel like something my tired brain had conjured up. It felt real. I'd driven another 30 miles when the headlights appeared again, materializing out of the darkness like ghostly orbs. This time they didn't belong to the same sedan. It was a different car entirely, a newer model, sleek and black, its paint gleaming faintly under the moonlight. But my stomach sank as it drew closer. As the car passed, I saw it. The child, the same golden hair, impossibly long and cascading down the back seat, the same pale, waxen face. And this time, the child was looking at me, its head tilted slightly, as if studying me. The unblinking eyes met mine, and I felt a jolt of fear so intense that I nearly swerved off the road. I slammed on the brakes, my truck screeching to a halt on the shoulder. My heart was pounding, and my hands were trembling on the wheel. I sat there for a moment, staring down the road as the black car's taillights faded into the distance. The rational part of my brain screamed at me that this was impossible. It couldn't be the same child. There was no way. And yet, I knew it was. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes and taking deep, shaky breaths. "It's just fatigue," I told myself. "You're overtired, and your mind's playing tricks on you." But the fear wouldn't go away. The image of the child's face was burned into my mind, and the longer I sat there, the more I felt the weight of its gaze, as if it were still watching me from somewhere in the shadows. I considered turning back, finding a motel, and calling it a night. But something stopped me. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. I'd made a commitment to deliver this load, and I wasn't about to let some hallucination scare me off the road. I shifted the truck into gear and pulled back onto the highway, my eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. The road stretched out before me, empty and silent. I tried to focus on the drive, keeping my thoughts on mundane things: the delivery, the paycheck, the coffee I'd grab at the next stop. But no matter how hard I tried, my mind kept circling back to the child, the hair, the eyes, the way it had looked at me, and the fact that it had appeared in 2 different cars. Another 30 minutes passed. The fear had settled into a dull, constant thrum in the back of my mind, like a distant storm you know is heading your way. And then, once again, the headlights appeared. This time, they emerged from the darkness behind me, growing brighter as the car approached. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my stomach twisting into knots. The car was silver, its sleek body reflecting the moonlight. It was a different car, yet again. I pressed the accelerator, my Freightliner groaning as it picked up speed. The car behind me did the same, its headlights staying close. My heart was pounding, my hands slick with sweat as I gripped the wheel. I wanted to believe it was just another traveler, someone trying to overtake me on this empty stretch of road. But deep down, I knew better. The silver car pulled into the left lane, moving up alongside me. I didn't want to look. I knew what I'd see, and I knew it would terrify me. But some morbid curiosity compelled me to turn my head. The child was there. The same golden hair, the same pale face, the same wide, unblinking eyes. This time, the child's expression had changed. It wasn't smiling, but there was something in its gaze, something knowing, something cruel. It raised a hand, pale and delicate, and pressed it against the window as if reaching for me. I swerved, my truck lurching violently as I struggled to keep it on the road. The silver car sped ahead, its taillights disappearing into the night. I pulled over to the shoulder, my entire body trembling. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my chest felt tight, as if I were suffocating. "This isn't real," I whispered, clutching the wheel like a lifeline. "This can't be real." But deep down, I knew it was. And I knew, without a doubt, that the child wasn't done with me yet. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should, my thumb hesitating over the call button. Calling the police seemed absurd. What would I even say? "Hi, officer. I'm seeing ghostly kids in cars that vanish into thin air." The thought of their laughter made me cringe, but the knot of fear in my stomach left me no choice. I dialed 911 and pressed the phone to my ear, my other hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The line connected, and a calm, practiced voice answered. 911, what's your emergency?" I swallowed hard, suddenly unsure of where to start. This is gonna sound strange, but I'm a truck driver, and I've been seeing something. On Route 36, a car with a child in the back seat. Long blonde hair, the operator interrupted, her voice sharp with recognition. My heart skipped a beat. "Yeah, you've heard about this?" There was a pause, and I could hear her typing on a keyboard. "You're not the first to call tonight. We've had over a dozen reports from drivers on that stretch of road. Different cars, same description. Can you pull over and give me your exact location?" I exhaled shakily, both relieved and unnerved. "Yeah, I'll stop at the next rest area, about 5 miles ahead." "Good. Stay on the line with me until you're safely parked." The knowledge that others had seen the same thing should have comforted me, but it didn't. If anything, it made the whole situation more disturbing. This wasn't just a trick of my tired mind. Something was happening on this road, and no one seemed to know what it was. I pulled into the rest area, a small, dimly lit lot with a couple of vending machines and a single parked car. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, the silence of the night pressing in around me. The operator's voice broke the stillness. "Are you parked?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "An officer is on the way. Stay in your vehicle and keep your doors locked." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. The waiting was unbearable. Every shadow seemed to shift, every creak of the truck a potential threat. I kept glancing at my mirrors, half expecting to see the child's pale face staring back at me. When the cruiser finally pulled into the lot, I felt a wave of relief so strong it was almost dizzying. The officer, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, approached my truck. I rolled down the window just enough to speak. "You're the one who called?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I've been seeing something. A kid with long blonde hair, in different cars. They keep showing up, and then they're just gone." The officer's face darkened. "You're not the first tonight. We've had calls from all over this stretch of road. Some drivers even said they stopped to check the cars, but they were empty." "Empty?" My voice cracked on the word. He nodded grimly. "We don't know what's going on. But this isn't the first time it's happened. There's been talk about this stretch of Route 36 for years. Stories about a kid matching that description. Some say it's an urban legend. Others, well, let's just say you're not alone in seeing things out here. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. So what do? The officer shrugged helplessly. Stay off this road if you can, and if you see anything else, call us. But truth be told, no one's ever figured out what's behind it. He handed me a card with his contact information and left me sitting there, alone in the cab of my truck, staring out at the empty highway. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that child's face, those wide, unblinking eyes staring back at me. I left Route 36 the moment the sun came up, swearing to myself I'd never drive that road again. But the questions never left me. Who or what was that child? Why did it appear to so many drivers? And what would have happened if I'd stopped my truck when I first saw it? Some mysteries are better left unsolved. But every now and then, when I'm driving a lonely stretch of highway late at night, I catch myself glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see those golden waves of hair glinting in the moonlight. And I wonder if I'll ever truly escape Ash Hollow.